What is an ambidextrous leader? To begin with the definition I originally found, an ambidextrous leader, although personally I prefer to speak of an ambidextrous executive, I'll explain why in a moment, is someone who performs both opening and closing leadership and can switch between the two as needed. With opening leadership, as a boss, you increase variance in employee behavior. For example, when a company like Google encourages its engineers to spend up to 20% of their time on projects they have chosen themselves. That is an example of opening leadership, which is good for exploration, because you are generating new ideas. Closing leadership, on the other hand, means that variance in employees' behavior is reduced through rules and compliance, and so on, which is good for exploitation because you increase efficiency. So, that provided a good starting point for my research, which I expanded on in my paper with the aim of making the assessment process for ambidextrous executives clearer and more specific. To opening and closing leadership, I added the roles of leader and manager and transactional and transformational styles of leadership, because parallels exist between these concepts. Opening leadership, transformational leadership, and the leadership role itself are all helpful in promoting exploration. And in the same way, exploitation is promoted by closing leadership, the management role, and transactional leadership. So, in the ambidextrous exec role, all of these things work together. I added the leader and manager role to make it clear that an ambidextrous executive is not defined only by the extent to which he or she ambidextrously leads employees, but also that the mindset of an ambidextrous executive is different. For example, if a top executive practices opening and closing leadership but doesn't fulfill the leadership role, it could happen that also preaching innovation, the exec doesn't allocate the resources needed to promote innovation. So, an ambidextrous executive is not only characterized by actions that explicitly involve directing the behavior of employees. Okay, that was the long version. In short, by ambidextrous top executive, I mean someone who personally promotes both exploration and exploitation with leadership and management, transactional and transformational, as well as opening and closing leadership. But that's not quite it. One important point is still missing, which is that you have to switch flexibly between these areas as and when needed. Let me keep my promise and explain why I prefer to talk about an ambidextrous executive rather than an ambidextrous leader. If we use the term ambidextrous leader, we can ask why not an ambidextrous manager? Because both roles are important in ambidextrous leadership, which also includes management. That's the reason I use the term ambidextrous exec.